about. What an honor and privilege it is to be here. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, just check. Okay, I do have a sense of humor. It's okay to laugh with me. I'll tell you, the greatest time in my career was serving at NSA and cyber. And we're going to talk about that for the next few hours. And I'm going to open it up for questions. I would tell you that one of the things that I do want to have us all do is give Deborah and Tony Sager a great round of applause for all they did for our country at NSA. So it was interesting. Just a couple of stories, and I've got a lot of stories. Some of them are true. And, it's like the fish story. But when I got to NSA, I actually got there, I got confirmed July 29th, and they canceled the Trailblazer program that day I got confirmed. I thought, well, that might be an honor of my getting confirmed. But that was our collection system. And one of the things that we had to do was go build another one, figure it out. So Secretary Rumsfeld said, yeah, that's your job, figure it out. And it was interesting. Deborah was running our education and training department and was happy there. She had this nice office, she was happy, she was sitting in her office. And I figured nobody should be that happy at work. Fix that. Actually, it's interesting, you go into these big rooms and there's a lot of people at NSA that were working, over 30,000. And some of them work for me. Joke. I'll go slower. And we had the staff, but when you went around this table, there were like 40 people that reported directly to me. I'm an army. I just learned to read just to get this job. You're going to have 40 people work for me. And so I said, well, who's the chief of staff? She goes, the current Maria was your chief of staff. I said, well, I have part of the staff. So what did they call you chief of part of the staff? They call you the cops. We already have cops there too, but so we couldn't use that. And so I said, who could we get to be chief of staff? And who has the gravitas, the experience? And it was Deborah. And it was amazing because we wanted to change the way NSA ran. And NSA has amazing people. So for those of you in school here, if you get a chance, as you're doing, apply it. It is the most amazing place. I'm going to talk about that. And Deborah and Tony and the rest of these seniors who actually run that and make me believe that I'm in charge are crown jewels for our country. They really are. The things that they do, and I'll tell you some of these stories that have been released, it's amazing. So for the young folks out there that are going through school, if you get the opportunity, as we talked about, try to do that. Somebody said, why did you stay 40 years in the Army? My father-in-law said it's because you can't get a job on the outside. But the reality was, it mattered. It was something worth doing. And at the end of the day, when people say, why were you in the Army? Why did you do it? It was the right thing to do. And we can make money later, or work on that. And so we're going to work on making money later. And I'll tell you, I had a chance to get out. I have 4 daughters, and we know, Catherine, I think they're very young. And 16 grandchildren. I don't look that old, thank you. And when I was just getting to be a general officer, I asked them, I got this great job offer for like triple what I made. And so I went home and I sat around the table and I said, I think we should get out. We could get cars, we could do this, we could do this. And they all said, you should stay in and be a general. I was stunned. I didn't know my wife let the kids drink. I'm going to talk a little bit about technology. Then I'm going to talk about cyber and terrorism and some stories about NSA, and then we'll open up for questions. For those of you, and I had a great opportunity to talk with a few of the students beforehand, and so thanks for that time from several of you. We live in exponential times. Look at what's going on around us. So Amir knows his company, right? And what he's trying to do, think about the amount of unique data that's going to be created this year is more than the last 5,000 years combined. You look at all this new technology that we have, watches and all these iPhones and all these, technology is doubling every 2 years. And it's interesting, if you go back to 2007, what happened in 2007? Two things. The attack on Estonia. The iPhone came out in 2007. The most in-demand jobs now didn't exist 11 years ago. iPhone apps, Android, the cloud, all these things, Facebook, Twitter. I'm sure Facebook would like to pull back some of the data, but all that didn't exist. Think about that. And now, for our children that are in school, we're teaching them for jobs that don't exist, with technology that hasn't been created, to solve problems we don't even know what problems. Imagine. I had the opportunity to talk to a bunch of folks up in New York City with Dr. John Kelly. And we both know him. He's the head of research for IBM and Watson, right? You see Watson all over the place. And that's really neat when Watson beat the best humans in Jeopardy. I think, okay, that's good, but not many people are going to bring their machine into a Jeopardy contest and beat humans. But what they did is they took Watson and they trained it on something. So if you have brain cancer, and a certain form of brain cancer, never knows this personally, it's very hard to diagnose your treatment. It took at that time, back in 2014, 5 doctors 30 days to look at the right therapy and radiation treatment. And normally patients are given 14 months to live plus or minus 2. With Watson, they've taken that from 30 days down to 9 minutes. It's amazing. And when you think about this technology that's out there, it will change medicine, education, how we interact, all these things. It's the biggest change ever. And it's going at an extraordinary rate. Tremendous opportunity. So all of those of you in cyber should be very excited. You're on the edge of that wave and right. And it's going to be an incredible journey. That's the good news. The bad news. As great as it is, it's also an evolving form of warfare. And you see that in a number of paths. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And I told you about Estonia. It was interesting. There's some true stories. You've got to have a sense of humor in this guy. Especially for all the things that happened, Snowden. We can't talk about him here. He's a bad person. And think about all the times in Congress and all the things that went on. But there are some really funny things that happen. And I'll give you a few of those. But in Estonia, President Ilves, who was the president of Estonia, they tipped over a monument there on Stalin in 2007, May of 2007. They were uprising against the Russians, and they, boldly pushed down that monument, and Russian hackers, I think of those as FSB guys, attacked Estonia with a massive distributed denial of service attack. And that knocked them off the web for about 2 weeks. They bank online, they vote online, they are more connected. They're only 1.4 million people than we are. And what you see is the first instance of cyber being used as an element of national power. One nation on another. And it's interesting because then in the next year, Georgia, the country Georgia, not Georgia, U.S., Russian troops attacked Georgia. And at the same time of that attack, when they crossed into Georgia, Russian hackers, FSB guys, hit their banks and government with the shooting now a service attack. And it was interesting. In October 2008, Deborah and Tony, and I forgot to mention John Nagin got stuff, so thank you for your service, John. When you think about all the things that happened, our guys were out there gathering information, and they got this information that was from our defense department, a place where it shouldn't have been. I can't go into all the details of it, but you can imagine. So, that looks odd. These bad guys have good guys' information that shouldn't happen. And so, you'll find the great irony in this. NSA was not authorized to go into the DoD network without being invited in 2008, too short. And so they go down and they knock on the door and they say, "We think you have a leak." They open up the door and they go, "These aren't the droids you're looking for." Close that door. And it took them about a week to convince these folks that they had a problem. So they invited in our folks, Dick Schaefer and the team, and Tony knows most of these guys. They were great. We learned some things about government. October 24th, 1630, Friday. All bad things in government happen on Friday afternoon to screw up your weekend. So there I am in my office. Dick Schaefer knocks on the door with 5 guys, not the hamburger guys, but just 5 ordinary guys. And he said, "We've got a problem." I said, "I know, it's Friday. You're here to screw up my weekend." He said, "We found 1,500 pieces of malicious software on a classified DoD network." And I thought, that can't be good. He said, "That's why you're the director." Pick right up on that. So I turned around, I called Secretary Gates, and I called Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I told them about this problem, which got them somewhat excited. And then I sat down at the table in my office with these folks around me. I said, "Okay, we identified the problem we have to fix." And of course, they had an idea for a solution about building this capability and the person goes with it and all that stuff. And, you know, as a general officer, my job is not necessarily to come up with technical solutions per se, but it's to come up with the timelines. And I had a favorite statement. Deborah knows right up the back. Nothing's too hard for those of us who don't have to do it. And the other one was, how hard can this be? It really gets people to like it. And so we talked about that, and we actually talked about, all joking aside, they understood how important this was for the country. And this group of folks went off, and 22 hours later had built that system, stood it up, connected it to the classified network, and solved that problem. Nobody else in the world could have done it, period. It was an extraordinary sense of duty and what we need to do that's good for our country. And it's interesting because then the services come in. Remember, I'm an Army guy, so they come in, and the first thing they do is they start counting their systems. And no, you've been virtual. Everything you had Friday is still here Monday. You've just been hacked. But they counted systems. Now think of this. An Army officer that you want to count 7 million every day and you come up with the same answer, not going to happen. So we kind of stepped out of that. No good deed goes unpunished, as you know that. thing that we learned. I learned the hard way. And so, actually, Secretary Bob Page was amazing. He really was. And it was interesting. He called me up and he said, you know, you've been in charge of the offense. The offense is NSA and Joint Functional Component Command Networker. You know, this is where you want to be. And then they said, we're going to give you the defense. Now, the offense always wins. It's 100-0. Now you're in charge of the defense too. And you're thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? And that's how Cyber Command was created. We put that together, the Joint Functional Command, Component Command Networker with Joint Task Force Global Network Ops, and then built these courses in. I'm going to interweave one other part here because I think it's important to at least get a sense of, for those of you going to NSA, the opportunity. Some stories. So this system that we had built is called turbulence, but there's some funny stories around it. And we built this to actually help our collection system. And there's another program that went side by side with it called Real-Time Vision Gateway. And I'll talk about those. But the story, the interesting part is on this collection system that helps us understand what's going on around the world. I had to go down and brief Secretary Rumsfeld. Now, as you now know, I have a sense of humor. And so I went down there, and we had come up with this idea of Pat Dowd and all the folks at NSA actually had a great solution. They had just gone to the R4 approach and R2. Great solution. It was really awesome. So I went in and I sat down. So I'm sitting at this little round table, really close, about this close from Peter Rumsfeld, maybe a little closer to Peter. Oh, you can almost reach me. And so I said, Mr. Secretary, would a 10% improvement a year be good? Thought for a minute. 10% would be good. I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary, I've been 10 times. And it was at that point he saw I was messing. And he started to turn bright red. And I thought, this is not good. He's either going to die or kill me. And you know he's still alive, right? And so I thought very quickly, so I quickly jumped in and started explaining the story before he could lash out. And I lived through that engagement. And Admiral Jim Stavridis was a military aide at the time. Great guy. He's sitting behind me. But it was fun. You got it. It was fun. But I do have on my refrigerator, don't mess with Rumsfeld, a little sticky. So I remember that. And it was interesting because Monday, that was Friday, I think not Friday, I should remember that. Monday he calls me up, I thought, well, he's still in there. And he said, meet me at the Oval Office tomorrow. 10 o'clock, be there. I want you to give that same briefing to the president. And so we walked in, and it was amazing. The president was amazing. I've got a leadership story at the end I'll talk about. But he has this way of talking that just puts you in. Sit down! Come on, sit down! So there's just 4 people. Rumsfeld, still a little mad. So I sat kitty corner from him so he couldn't reach me. Cheney and the president. And we walked through that program. I can't go into all the pieces of it, but it wasn't anything. Following with that was a system called the real-time communication. I went to Iraq in 2006. I went over there. Dave Petraeus was a classmate of mine. All the key leaders over there, and you know many of them, were in Iraq. Ray Odierno, Stan McChrystal, all these folks. And I went in there because I thought, NSA, the biggest collector, how do you like us? We're probably the best in the world. You guys are Go ahead, slap me on the back, cut myself ready to go. I said, how's the SIGINT? I said, it's okay, it's not as good as human. And I thought, what? Every Iraqi's got a phone. And what do you mean it's not as good? He says, yeah, it takes about 16 hours to get us the information. 16 hours. Why does it take so long? So we got a group together that looked at that. And they came up, and this is where Pat Dowd and Jim Heath and several others, who also created this other system, came up with this idea of what can we do to get intel to the warfighters? Because if you remember at that time, the number of U.S. casualties was climbing, doubling about every 2 months. And it was getting to a really big problem by December of 2006. That system went in January. And instead of taking 16 hours, they were able to get intel to every combat brigade in 1 year. That helped take down 3,950 bad guys. And the thing that made me so proud was not just the fact that they could build a system like that, but the military and the civilians. I can remember Kevin Ford. You all know Kevin Ford. He's not an athletic kind of guy. He might be a little bit on the heavy side. In a combat zone with a steel pod on and some civilian fatigues, pulling wire to help save our troops. That's what they did. It was amazing. And we went and pushed a number of people in there with Joint Special Ops Command, Stan McChrystal and stuff, and it turned around that war. And Dave Petraeus credits that system with breaking the back of the resistance. So if you look at his book, that's the system of real-time communication he talks about. NSA. Now, so the terrorism, let me hit one other terrorism story, and then I'll come back to cyber. Because, you know, we didn't get to talk a lot about, I've been married for 40 years. No, I don't look that old until you were 23, right? And so my wife married me so nobody else would have to. And it was, we met in 9th grade. And so I've known her for a long time. And I've been in intelligence my whole career. And so I could never talk about what I did. But she's clever. She knew when so this one night, or one day, what happened, Jessica Buchanan, this one was publicly revealed, so I forgot. There's a couple of guys. Jessica Buchanan was captured by smuggling pirates, along with a Danish person, either and the problem was, information had gotten to the State Department that she would probably die of that if they would do it in the next 60 days. So State Department calls up. The Defense Department said, you got him on rescue. And the Defense Department goes, good, where is she? What do you think finds her? And in a sense. And we had built a battle bridge at that time. And it was amazing to sit in there and see this operation go on. And Joe Votel, who just turned that up, was the commander of Joint Special Ops Command. You see him on one screen. You know how you saw that stuff with all the things on the Clancy movies with the little things? Real world was and sitting in there, helping do that, and that went on probably for 6 hours. We got done about midnight, and they rescued her and got all her and the other. If you're ever taken hostage, you want JSOC to rescue you, and don't jump up. Stay down. And if your captors are silly enough to pull their weapons, we have another sticky on my refrigerator that says big mistake. All 9 captors unfortunately died in a few, like 3 seconds. That was unfortunate. I wasn't this old. home late that night, and my wife goes, so what's up? So she waits for the paper 2 days later, and so she'll figure out what's happening. You think of all the raids and everything that goes on, that's how they do it. I'll give you one more terrorism story about NSA and why I'm so proud. And actually, this summer it will be a movie called Declassified. So if you look at Declassified, the inaugural Azazi terrorist thing will be one of the shows that we have. NSA was tracking some bad guys in Pakistan, and they saw communications coming into the U.S. under court order. They could go to that service provider, recognizing communications coming from Al-Qaeda-related operatives into the U.S. and see who is that and what's going on. And what they found is that this guy, name unknown, number unknown, that's all you have to say. You know, his email account and phone number account. And talking about building a wedding and words that gave us the insight that they were planning upon. And NSA's job is to give that to FBI. Then FBI can go in with a national security letter and do some things to pull out and find out that that's actually Zazi and his phone number. NSA can do some things to figure out parts of the network, give that back to them. And with all that information, those, Zazi and Cotton Cybersecurity and another, planning to bomb the New York City subway. If that hadn't been brought, it would have been the biggest terrorist incident since 9/11. Hundreds of people on the subway would have died. NSA started, and FBI did an amazing job. And you know, that's what we learned after 9/11 about how our agencies work together. So it's not just about cyber going to NSA. There's some amazing things. And most of them you can't talk about. Most of them you deal publicly. On the cyber side, we left off in 2008, Secretary Gates. When we stood up Cyber Command, it was really interesting, and it was, you know, some great opportunities. It was our opinion, mine and Secretary Gates, that if you're going to stand up a command like that, it had to be stationed at Fort Meade and work with NSA. They are the technical talent for our nation. Cyber Command without that could do a good job. And so he came up with this idea of promoting me to 4-star. So I actually got there in 2005 for a 3-year assignment and ended in 2014. So I got extended as punishment for being a wise guy several times. And I would have stayed a lot longer, but somebody said, you know, you're like the Rickover from the Navy. I thought, wow, it's 34 years, I used to be 34 years. I'll be 60 by the time we get out. And it was amazing. Standing up cyber and partnering that with NSA, looking at where we go in cyber and how you build that force. We had these discussions with Secretary Gates. And a few of those were also how do we stand up, what do we do, where do we go, how do we build our defense, cyber force. And some of you asked a question earlier today about, you know, these attacks, what's going on, what do you see? And Secretary Gates, at the time, President Bush, and then President Obama, said, what do you see is going to happen in cyberspace? And we believed at the time that you're going to see these attacks go from disruptive, like we saw in 2007 and 2008, to destructive. And then you can use these elements of national power. And in fact, you see in 2012, the Saudi Aramco attacks were actually Iranian hackers come in and destroy over 30,000 systems, the data on 30,000 systems. I will tell you that today, Iranian hackers are attacking Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Ring, UAE. That doesn't in the last month. And so it's building. And the issue that we're going to face is a couple. And we had a chance to briefly talk about this. I want to give you all the rest of that story. I believe we're going to see cyber not only used as an element of national power, but attack this country. And we are not ready. And we have some issues to get over. And part of that issue, although Congress has authorized the sharing of cyber threat information from critical infrastructure companies and others with the government, it's not shared at a manner and speed that makes it actionable by the government. So, if you take Sony, you can have so many things with Sony in sensitive. When Sony got hacked, by the time the government found out, all the government is doing is incident response. That means that they come in and they say, you've been hacked. He goes, no, I didn't. You lost all your data. I know I lost all my data. You're going to probably lose your job. Thanks, I know that. And they did. What they would rather have is the government's help in stopping a nation state from attacking. Now, it's my assessment that our energy sector, our finance sector, our healthcare sector, and other critical sectors can be impacted by cyber attacks. Will be impacted beyond the theft of intellectual property, beyond stealing personal identifiable information. And it's also my opinion that we can't have companies go on the offense. Why? Well, if we take Sony as an example, and Sony is allowed to fight back North Korea, we get Tony, John, Deborah, and me, and a few more, Catherine, a couple others. We go in, we could kick their butt. In fact, we make it really challenging for North Koreans, so much so that they wonder, did we just up the ante? And what would they do? Respond with artillery and missiles. Oops, we just started physical war because we ratcheted it up. And inherently government responsibility. And that's where the Defense Department comes in. They're responsible for actually protecting this nation, defending this nation. So I had the opportunity to sit on the President's Commission for Cybersecurity. Obama set up this commission. I sat on that. I was the humor guy. And this was one of the areas that I thought, how are we going to defend cyberspace? And how do we get the roles and missions of government aligned with industry to protect it? Because it will happen. It's going to happen. And we need to be ready. And we're not. And the consequence of that is we're going to have a significant issue, I believe, in the next few years. We lose part of our infrastructure because we're not. And I believe it's the government's job. And we actually use this. We said, and it was kind of interesting because I always had this Constitution. General, have you read the Constitution? This one? Yes, I have. As a matter of fact. And so I used it. It said, in the Constitution preamble, it says, for the common defense. We have this government for the common defense. We don't have the government for the common defense, parentheses, unless it's cyber, then you're on your own. We don't have it in there unless it's really hard, then you're on your own. We don't have it in there unless it's really fast, then you're on your own. It's for the common defense security. Because that's what our government was created to do. And I believe that's what we need to do. Now, it creates a whole series of problems. I think the civil liberties and privacy, we're not talking about putting per se identifiable information on. We're talking about cyber threat. We're going to have to get very good at this. And we've got to build that infrastructure to build our nation. active. Because this is, as one of you all brought out earlier, a future for warfare. It's going to be used. We have to be ready. I'm going to give you one more story, and then I'll open it up for some comments. We were blessed to have President Bush come up to NSA. And again, you do have a sense of and so he lands in his helicopter there, and I'm standing there. And my house was over there, and I told my wife to see if the Secret Service said, stand back from the window. She didn't stand back. So he gets off the airplane and said, welcome to Fort Meade. The president, he goes, General, get in the car, we got to talk. So, and what they had told me is that you would find out if you're going to ride with the president when he gets off the helicopter. He'll tell you. If he tells you get in the car, get in the car. If he doesn't, get in your own car. And so I get in this car with him. He doesn't let anybody else in. He's in the jump seat. I'm in his seat. I'm thinking, how cool is this? Unfortunately, the windows are blocking out. Can't we get somebody to take a picture here? He actually wanted to talk to me, so I thought, maybe Rumsfeld talked to him about me being a wise guy. He goes, General, we got two issues we got to talk about. He said, first they tell me you got too many bosses. I thought, ooh, danger, Will Robinson. My boss is the president, the vice president, Secretary Rumsfeld, Negroponte, Cambone, the chairman, and the commander Stratton, all who are senior to me. Who are you going to throw under the bus and live the next day? And so I wisely, one time in my life, I wisely said, Mr. President, I don't have any problem with my bosses. They're all good to me. And actually, they were. I didn't ask them, which one do you want to get rid of? Can we go back and revisit that one? Which one? I just want to know. Was it 2, 3? Maybe we get. And they said, this was at the time of the terror surveillance program, 2006. And he said, General, this issue on terror surveillance program is going to get real bad. It's going to be real bad. Here's the deal. You defend the country, I'll take the heat. And he did every step of the way. It was the greatest act of leadership I'd seen in 4 years. And not only did he do that, he went into NSA, met with a bunch of our folks, and then did a press conference in front of the NSA security officer, Lee, Cheney, McConnell, and Hadley, the national security advisor, standing behind him. And he said it was his program to defend this country. That's the kind of leadership our country needs. That was what I think was the best act of leadership, and it was a privilege and honor to say that. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions or answers. I'll take answers first, and then marry them up to questions. So, any questions? Oh, sir.
A month or so ago, Ted Koppel talking about his book that was written about the attack on the electric grid. Should we all be as fearful as he made us that night?
So I actually, you may know, he talked to me on that book.
He didn't relate that.
That's good, that's good. It's actually kind of neat to meet with him. I have like 6 copies of that book signed by him. I thought, how many should I give me? I only have 12. I do have 4 daughters, 16 grandchildren. Either give me 4 or give me 22. I think, well, first of all, I have, in my company, we work in the energy sector. The CEOs in the energy sector are forward-leaning, and they want to solve this problem. But the reality is it's not an energy company only. If you're going to attack an energy sector company, it's a government who's got to help them block the attacks from nation states. So that's what we're setting out to do. I think there's work to do with it. It is a great concern. I don't think you'd have to worry about, the part 3 in this book where you start storing rations. I have some of my friends doing that for me. No, I just kidding. Jen, that's a ration. I think it's a problem. I think what I'm worried about is the Northeast in the wintertime or in hot summer. And I do believe countries like Iran and Russia get pushed diplomatically, or let's say that we do with terrorists, or we pull back on the Iran deal. They're going to respond inside. And we've done all that. And in fact, the attack on Saudi Aramco and then the 350 attacks on Wall Street, distributed denial of service attacks, were because the U.S. sanctioned Iran in the energy and mining sector. So I suspect that the next time we'll see it with peace strike, that will have some major consequences, some major outages. My experience, though, is that the energy companies are working that hard, but it's still a risk that has to be faced. I'm actually meeting with about 45 of them next week, just on that problem and how we go solve it. So, you have go ahead.
What was your favorite and least favorite things about working for the
My favorite, the people. Beyond a doubt. You know, on Christmas, I had a skip in my basement. It's kind of cool to go down the basement. And a special department intelligence facility, top secret, all the colleges in the world. Nobody's there at Christmas, but you call them still listen to it. And I get a call from one of my friends in Afghanistan. We have a problem with the bomb. It's a huge bomb. And so that NSA on Christmas for 250 years was working on the mission. Not one of those people ever complained to me, or did I ever hear any of them ever complain about having to spend their Christmas. They just did it. It was great. That, and seeing that every day was the best thing about it. And the military. The worst thing, well, that's Snowden, that rat. And I have other names for him, but I can't say them now. That brother is my counsel. I think the insider threats and things that we face like that, and for him to talk about doing this for the good country is absolutely wrong. We've seen that go on now. It has put a lot of people at risk and probably caused a lot of deaths. And that was the worst part of it, if I was to say one thing, because I think everybody that can say helping trust the people there, and have somebody like that do something now is right now. Go ahead.
My question is in general. In your opinion, what is probably the weakest link out of this list for companies and government defense for cybersecurity? Human factor, hardware,
What kind of attacker?
and cyber attack.
Okay.
Human factor, such as Bethesda, is national. Hardware, software to design, or a combination of it. Where could you, or what could you?
E.
Oh,
I think, you know, you could easily say a combination, but
and one other thing, lack of recognition that there is a possibility.
well, I think educating people is clearly perfect. You bring up the point that I would just turn a little bit and say, here's part of the issue. You know, everybody here's probably got passwords on their phone, their device, network, and all these other things, and then this company, that's what this company, and then you got to remember these three things about your childhood, these things about this. And then pretty soon you're saying, what? And some of those I wasn't truthful because I wanted to switch it up. Now I can't remember what it says. You got to write it down. Of course, you don't want to write it down because then some bad guy comes to your house and get it. So what do? And this is crazy. We have people trying to authenticate who they are. So access management in doing that, and patching, having humans patch machines, when we should have this automated or figure out some way to let machines do it. You know, for the Defense Department, we'd be patching the change that should take 180 days. This is crazy. And all these passwords and stuff, we've got to come up with better ways. Those become, I think, the vulnerabilities. And then, you know, somebody puts their password in the file called password. Probably not good. Or they used to be password. My wife's name is Debbie. Guess what the most common name for passwords were? One of the top 5 was Debbie. I thought, ooh, her. Have to change that one pretty soon. So I put Debbie asterisk. Yeah, it'll take a while. Think about it. This is crazy.
Yeah. I've got 2 interconnected questions.
Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned that technology is being driven into obsolescence on about a 24-month time scale. In history and anthropology, we call that space-time compression, where you're taking the amount of time that something takes to move across space and you're compressing it by a certain factor of 2 or 5 or whatever. That explains how mass transit and mass media came along. With that in mind, the federal law that regulates privacy was passed in 1974. Do you think at this point we need to admit that regulators and certainly private industry, Facebook, can't keep up with the basic demand that certain personal information become private? Is that part of the bargain we have to make with the government and the bank and the water company and the phone company and so on and so forth? And my second question is, when you talk about critical infrastructure, how much do we have to invest to get to the point where we don't have to tell our fellow citizens, we can't protect your information, we can't necessarily keep the hospitals going or the trains running on time, or we can't guarantee that your paycheck will show up, and here's how we'll compensate you in the event that we are attacked by a foreign power or some nut in his basement, and this is the level of compensation you qualify for.
You know, it was at this point that I used to say, could you repeat that? No, just say, and thanks to your mom for her service to our country. So, you bring out some great points. But here's my thoughts. And I know you have a history major, and I know you're doing good here. And it's my opinion that we can solve this. Point 1. It's not an intractable problem. And our government can do this. Technically, we can do this. And I know an agency that's really good at coming up with technical solutions. And we can protect civil liberties and privacy. You bring out a great point here, which is our laws and Congress need help in this case. Unfortunately, when you say that to them, then they want you to come testify. So I'm going down Wednesday to testify in the Armed Services Committee for just that point. I think this is something that we can solve, we need to solve. It's in our nation's interest. The laws and the policies lag far behind. I also think that it's interesting that Facebook and Google, Twitter, welcome to our world. I don't think there was malice or forethought. I don't think anybody's trying to take my data and do something with it. It was the principle upon which they built their company to provide ads to build a company that generated revenue, which at the time sounded like a good idea, and I could sell that. Oops. Maybe I should be careful about that. Second step. And our laws and policies have not kept up. And as you pointed out, if technology is doubling every 2 years, that means half of what we're learning is outdated every 2 years. How do we get our laws, our policies, practices to that speed? And the answer is we've got to. To say anything less, this is a huge problem. And so, from my perspective, to get the defense of our country set right, we have to solve those problems. And it's going to require Congress to work together to do that for the good of our country. Other questions? Please.
Thank you, General. I would just like to know, if, in as much you could tell us within a very general context, to what extent was the cyber intelligence, or G2, I guess is what I was getting at, to what role did it play in the capture, but more importantly, the release of Baghdadi, who we had in our custody, and then my understanding was he was released and went on to form ISIS.
Well, clearly we didn't do that. Really good guy. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. I will tell you that, you know, with all the numbers of people that they have to end and they release, that these are good people just trying to do the best they can with all the things they have. And if you can imagine taking in tens of thousands of academics trying to figure out who the bad guys and who the capture and release, and the courts and locked them at the time were part of that process. And so I would probably look to that as where, you know, the system is hard. And yep, people are going to make mistakes. One of the things that I felt, and Chris Lewis, and Deborah, and others felt, so when I was in charge, it's my job. I'm responsible. Now in that case, I didn't run a rat. Being pretty, and, you know, doing the best I could in very tough circumstances. So the answer is yes, I'm going to make mistakes. I don't know where that was made. I'll tell you that it's going to happen. And with that bond, we'll do the best job we can. Every step of the way. And knowing these people, the caliber of what they're doing, and the hours they're working, and the money they're paying, they're the two heroes. These are really good heroes. So I would put anything better, I'm going to say that's cool. Other questions?
Sir?
Over here.
Sure, the critical infrastructure threats are fairly obviously stated. And what about things that are a little bit more pernicious and a little bit more subtle, like the control of social media or the manipulation of social media to affect our elections? These things tend to fall below the response, like the military response, but yet still require some sort of governmental response to punish bad actors, state actors, that type of thing. It seems hard to do. What thoughts do you have about that? Keeping in mind that possibly it's like stuck next, unintended consequences.
On this question, the government has two ways of responding to actions. And it was the most amazing opportunity to be director, I have to say, because I got to go to the White House and sit in the Now, not all of them were, I was thankful to be there, but imagine sitting with President Bush, then President Obama, and the key principals talking about what our nation is going to do. And the debates at the principal and the deputies levels of women all the time to come up with the right solution for our country to these sets of issues. And it was interesting. You know, we can talk about politics, but Bush and Obama in that environment acted about the same. It's the right thing for our country. How do we do it? Where do we go? And so my experience is they look at that. Not everything that comes out of that is made public for a lot of reasons. So I've been out of government since the elections, since 2014, so I have no knowledge of this. But I can surmise that if they took an action that was covert, we won't know what it had. And that's the way it should be. I would say trust our government and the people that are working in it, that they're going to try to do the very best they can. And every job that they do and the use of materials are defined and based on what's the least amount of force that I need to use to stop a war or something like that. And it was an honor and privilege to serve. And, you know, I hope someday all that's put out and that everybody will know and they say, dang, that was pretty good. Okay, I guess we have time for one more. Oh, this young lady's in the way, then I'll get you two, I'll get both of you. All right, one more plus 1 point.
First, thank you for your service.
Here, we're gonna get you a free microphone, you can take it home with you.
My question is, what do you think young professionals can do to prepare themselves, and what is the biggest challenge they're facing entering in cybersecurity?
Okay, that's a great question. Thank you for that, because one of the things I wanted to bring up, I came from, northern New York, outside of Syracuse. My parents didn't have a lot of money. They used the little money that they had to send my oldest brother, then my next oldest brother to college. And then there was, all the money's gone. And so I got a scholarship to a all-boys school, West Point. And actually, the reason I took that, I got a full scholarship to Syracuse, Purdue, and West Point. And I had this really belief that, West Point, they pay you. The other would just pay for your education. They're going to give you money. I'm going to go to school and get half a lieutenant's pay. How cool is that? And they said they harass you there. How bad could that be? So I went there, and after 3 days, I called my dad and said, hey, you got to get me out of here. These guys are crazy. He said, stick it out. I did. And I'll tell you, that was 1974. I was 2 at the time. And I went to Germany and around the world, and I got to see what our military is like and to work with these young men and women. And I thought, this is a good thing to do. So the first point that I would make to you is you can do anything. I'm going to, my high school wants me to come back to graduation speech. This is so funny. I used to get in trouble all the time. I was probably the poster child for, you shouldn't do that. The Darwin kind of thing. Watch this! And turning the lights off during the musical or something like that. It's a mistake. And, so I'm going back to that. And, when you look at my background, we weren't wealthy. We weren't even, I was, I think it was one of these songs. I wasn't white trash, but I wasn't first class. We had great opportunity. This country gives young people like you a tremendous opportunity. You can do anything that you set your mind to do. And having a great education and pushing the envelope, do it. This is your life. And when you think back, you look back, and you're my age, 23, right? And when you look back, you want to say, did I do something that I was proud to do? And that's more important than being the CEO of Facebook in my mind. Now, the CEO of Facebook got a cool airplane. Okay, that I can live without that. I would much rather have that story of Jessica Buchanan, one of us has the ability to work with these great people from NSA and our military than that. And I think as you think about this, you can do both. You have a great career, you can make a difference, you can enjoy it, you can have a sense of humor, not with Rumsfeld. And so for you, the sky's the limit. It's interesting. I heard that in China they're coming up with a numbering system. They tell you where you fall and what airlines you can use, what hotels you can use based on your ranking. We don't have to here. I got to go to almost any hotel. Sir.
Cybersecurity is growing and far more evolving, I would imagine. Another trend is artificial intelligence. Do you see, as there's a lot of people who are concerned with the future of cybersecurity, do you see artificial intelligence replacing people leading in cybersecurity and taking on those words and jobs? And in a sense, everything that happens in cybersecurity is machine accessible.
I think, so the question is on artificial intelligence, and will it replace all those that are working in cybersecurity? Not for another week. And I don't think actually, that's not how this will evolve. We actually did a couple of patents on a cognitive computation system, which is the integration of machine learning, expert systems, and AI all combined. And I think that's where the future will go. There's a philosophy about uplifting the human race. And I think what AI will allow us to do is to take that to the next level. Now, you can get the Bill Gates and the Elon Musk versions of it's going to be all bad or it's not so bad. I'm more of the Bill Gates, it's not bad. I think it's going to be good. It's like trying to stop the computer. It's going to happen. And so I think what we want to do is guide it to the good of mankind. And, you know, this is where we can uplift the human race. All the things that we talk about medicine, the way we collaborate, solving perhaps some of these policy issues and other issues. And there's some tremendous opportunities. Now, the young folks that are here going through school, it will be your job as you go into these areas to help us figure out how to do this right. And you're going to learn that by reading and continuing to get education. And so, where the industrial age and coming into this age wasn't changing so fast, you're going to be constantly learning to stay up. So, you have a tremendous opportunity. So thank you very much, folks.